Hey, you're listening to Terms of Engagement. I'm Archon Fung, a professor at the Harvard Kennedy School and director of the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation.
And I'm Stephen Richer, former elected Maricopa County recorder and now a senior practice fellow in American governance at the Ash Center at Harvard Kennedy School.
We're back for our weekly series, and we're trying something new this week. As you can see,
yeah, it's pretty fancy. It's pretty great.
Studio on the campus of Harvard University.
And thanks to the continuing education folks for making this possible. We're going to be talking about trains today. And because we're going to be talking about trains and train stations, in just a bit, we're going to be joined by former Department of Transportation Secretary Anthony Foxx, who's now a professor here at the Harvard Kennedy School. He's going to join us in a few minutes. But tee us up. Why are we talking about trains? Why are we talking about train stations?
Well, specifically, there have been recent federal moves to get more involved in train transportation in the United States. Union Station, as people know, is a central transportation hub in Washington, D.C. that first opened in 1907. It came under Department of Transportation ownership in the 1980s, but its management has been largely outsourced to private companies. It's a major Amtrak station. But on Wednesday of last week, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy announced the Department of Transportation's plan to take over the management of Union Station, bring it back into the federal government. Of particular interest to those of us in Boston and Cambridge, hours later, Deputy Secretary Steven Bradbury floated the idea of federal involvement and maybe a takeover of South Station in Boston, which is run by the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, the MBTA.
So pause. So the context is there's this really big train station in Washington, D.C. that's just a stone's throw from the Capitol, and the federal government is going to play a larger role there. This is what it sounds like.
And they've already announced that, and then they're thinking about maybe taking a larger role in South Station in Boston.
Okay, and so South Station in Boston is currently run by the Boston Metro Transit Authority, or some acronym like that.
MBTA, the Massachusetts Transportation Bay Authority, Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority.
Okay, but as part of this debut of this rollout of this new Excella train, the department said something about maybe the federal government is going to get involved with the South Station here in Boston. And so for that reason, Archon and I figured that over this long weekend, over this Labor Day weekend, we would go out to South Station and we would ask people, what do they think about the station? What do they think about the federal government's involvement in the station? Is the station meeting their expectations? And so we collected some footage from that, and I think we can roll that now.
Yeah, we don't often leave Harvard Yard, but sometimes this is a show about democracy, so we do like to talk to the people, and this is a great opportunity to do that. So please roll the reel.
And I'm Steven, and what's your first name? Priscilla? Okay, fantastic. Priscilla, how often do you come to the train station?
Not often, no.
Not often, but when you come here, how do you feel? Do you feel safe here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you do feel safe?
Oh, yeah, I do.
I kind of wish that the terminals were a little cleaner.
Wish that it was a little cleaner
I
here.
think maybe in safety, maybe not as sanitary as they could be.
Okay. No, that's perfect.
But,
so the federal government has said that it might look into playing more of a role in the management of the South Station.
Okay.
Is that something you think would be a good thing, a bad thing, whatever thing?
Not this federal government, no.
Okay.
Not this one.
So even if they said we want to make it safer or cleaner or more timely?
Yeah, I feel like with this administration, it's always kind of something you want to, what they say is not always what they mean, and you kind of want to look into the exact changes.
Okay.
I'm all for making it safer if people are feeling unsafe, but I think with this administration, I'm not so sure they're saying what they mean and what those changes actually will mean for the people here.
Feel safe in here?
Generally.
Okay. Have you ever had a less than perfectly safe incident?
No.
Have you ever seen anything like that?
Last time I was here, yeah, it was kind of a guy who was annoying some other passengers for money or something like that.
Oh, wow.
So just going around asking for money and sort of getting in their faces or something like that? Okay. What about if the National Guard came here? Is that something you'd support? Is that something you'd oppose?
God, why would they be? I guess why? Why would they be here?
Okay.
Would I oppose it? Sure. Unless there's a need for the National Guard to be.
I would not see that there's a problem here that's any worse than anywhere else in the US. They're looking at Democratic-run states, and they're kind of trying to make out that Democrats are making a mess of running these places.
So the federal government has said that it's looking into playing a bigger role in South Station with respect to safety, with respect to cleanliness, with respect to timing of trains. Is that something that would be good, bad?
Yeah.
You're not sure?
No, I think it'd be a fantastic idea.
To have the federal government come in and maybe do more in South Station?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm just here to do my daily business, which is just get on the train, maybe grab a drink and go home.
And
I don't really want to have to deal with stepping over homeless people in the bathroom.
all right, we're back. And that was our snippet. So that's how we spent our weekend. Hopefully you did something a little more, I don't know, vacation-y or celebratory of Labor Day. But we are now joined by the real professional, and that is Professor Anthony Foxx, who is head of the Center for Public Leadership here at the Harvard Kennedy School, the former mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina, and importantly for this conversation, the former director of the Department of Transportation, the 17th director under President Obama. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So did the trains run on time in the United States?
Do they now, or did they then?
Oh, let's start.
Either one. Yeah, both.
Well, they ran pretty well back in the day. But you know, the interesting thing about this conversation is just the federal government really functions more as a capital contributor to infrastructure across the country. It does very little operational work. It doesn't typically run things. Typically, the highway system, for example, is run by states with contributions by the federal government. The transit systems are run by cities with contributions from the federal government system. So it is interesting to see the administration trying to take an operational turn into operating train stations and things. I'm not sure where the money comes from. I'm not sure where the operational expertise comes from. But hey, you know, it's a new day in America.
When you were Transportation Secretary, did you ever look into a state or locality and think, oh, that train station is doing awful, or that highway system is terrible? We have to get into a more operational role because the locals aren't doing what they need to do.
I did have an experience with WMATA,
Where's
where
that?
that's the Washington, D.C.
Okay.
subway system.
Oh, okay.
I'm a Westerner.
That's all right. It's all right. It's okay. West is cool too. Actually, they were having a spate of safety incidents, explosions in the train stations. There were people who lost their lives in various places at various points in time. And I wasn't convinced that they were running a tight operation around safety. So we actually threatened to shut down WMATA. Before we actually were able to execute on that, they shut themselves down for a safety stand down for a couple of days and proposed reforms to step up their safety approach. But that was one example where we almost got into an operational role.
So how unusual would this be? Because I don't think most people understand just how much of a departure from the norm that this may be. So first, Union Station, to the extent that the federal government might take over directly the management of Union Station, which is a very large operation, has both the metro and then it has, you know, Amtrak also coming through, and it's right near the Capitol. Would that be very weird?
So in a sense, it's sort of like me taking over my glasses. Like the federal government actually owns Union Station. They actually outsource the operations of Union Station to a local nonprofit, partly because the federal government typically doesn't run things. The one thing the U.S. government does run is the air traffic control system.
Yes.
That is the one thing in the U.S. DOT that is operational in nature, but otherwise not. So what's weird is that there's this argument of a takeover, but it's taking over something the government already owns, and it already outsourced the operational responsibility of leasing spaces and keeping up the maintenance and providing security and various things. So,
just like you might own this building, but you're not going to oversee all aspects of the management,
the building
management.
Exactly.
Physical plan.
So why would they want to do that in Union Station? That seems like more burden, more hassle.
Yeah, the argument would be over the last, let's say, 20 years, some of the leases haven't been re-upped by some of the tenants. Union Station reopened back in the 1980s as a new refurbished center, fallen in disrepair in the 1970s. And it actually was a great place to go shopping and have restaurants and various things. And over the last 10 or 15 years, I think it has actually gone down a little
Okay.
bit. So there's a big argument for changing the direction of where Union Station is going. I think public safety is always a concern. It's also an argument the administration is using for putting National Guard troops in Washington, D.C. Union Station has become a bit of a magnet for some types of crime. So there are reasonable arguments for doing more. Whether the federal government is the best agent long term to operate Union Station, I think, is a big open question.
So one of the issues I wanted to get into in this discussion is, I think there's a principal issue, right? Should the federal government be more involved in things like running train stations? And then there's a person issue. Should this administration be more involved in getting, and I think you heard on the video a range of differences that people we talked to on the principal issue. A lot of people said seemed like, we don't know what their politics were, but seemed like, with different politics saying, there's things that don't work very well about, you don't have to step over homeless people. Maybe there are drug things going on that aren't great. We went in the daytime. We didn't go at night.
We did not witness any of that.
We did not witness any of that, to be clear. But so if you're running into that, some people seem quite open to the idea that, maybe federal help would be good here at the operational level to kind of clean things up in that regard. What do you think?
I guess the question is on what issues. Like, the pushing the National Guard to do more law enforcement activity is a huge, first of all, it's a huge expense. And so the quick query, how long the federal government can do this, in an indeterminate amount of time. Secondly, you have the question of, leasing space. Is the federal government better positioned to do that than a private sector organization? To be a landlord. Right, to be a landowner, a leasing agent, a real estate agent. And obviously, this president is a real estate developer. He sees himself as someone who does big things. Train stations are an attractive place to do that sort of thing. But I think he's going to find the federal government there are a lot of antibodies to doing what he's trying to do with this operating function in train stations.
Well, so what is the department's current role with respect to something like South Station, which, unlike Union Station, the department doesn't own South Station, but it probably gives some funding?
Capital support. That's the bread and butter of what the Federal Department of Transportation does. Is it won't generally pay for bus drivers or train operators, but it will pay for new train sets like the new Acela sets that have come online. It'll also support some of the capital improvements to the actual physical station. But in terms of having somebody come in, turn the lights on in the morning, someone to clean the place up, someone to provide public safety, those are operating responsibilities that the federal government typically is not funding.
It's interesting. One of the people who really favored maybe more federal role in South Station, we didn't show this part of the video, but it was the guy with the hat with the American flag. He actually worked for the post office. So he actually works for a very operational part of the federal government. Maybe he could say, okay, well, I like how the post office runs, the U.S. government runs that. Why can't it do that in South Station or even Union Station?
Well, and the other part, the Postal Service actually has authorities from Congress to do what it does.
Sure, there are laws that say.
Exactly. So, that's the thing that's really interesting here is that, I don't know where the budget's coming from to do some of this activity. And you're seeing some of the contorted ways in which the administration is trying to sort of create an argument that there's a national emergency, so I have to bring the National Guard in to do this thing. And I just don't see how they're going to smoothly be able to operate without Congress giving the administration operational authority, funding, and responsibility to do that.
Would this be a major legal problem if tomorrow the Department of Transportation said, hey, hand over the keys? We're going to be unlocking the building in the morning and we're going to be locking it up at night and you're out?
A bigger challenge in Boston than in Washington, D.C.
Which makes sense, right? So what about the politics of this? Why are they doing this?
I have a lot of hypotheses here. What do you think is really going on? Okay, one idea, I think maybe Trump is the socialism as Nixon is the China. Right. So China, Nixon was the guy who was tough on China. He was the only person who was capable of establishing diplomatic relations. And Trump, as you said, he really likes to run things. He likes to be a good manager. So he's taken over stakes in Intel. He wants to run part of this university and some others. He wants to have a big say in law firms. And now it looks like he wants to run train stations too. So I think he's opening up some space for government to become a much more, have a much bigger role in operational matters. That's somewhat of a departure from the capitally Democrat and capital R Republican consensus on smaller
but not for
government and
ideological
capitalism.
reasons. Because he's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
an ideological person.
Right, that's
so
true,
there has
that's
to
true.
be sort of like, do you accrue benefits from it? Is it the fact that a lot of people interact with train stations every single day? I mean, you can probably say how many thousands of people go through something like Union Station every single day. And is it just like a touch point, or is it that they're
Maybe
grand?
he thinks it can be better. Maybe he thinks it can be like Mar-a-Lago or Trump Tower in Manhattan.
I have no doubt that in his mind he thinks it can be better. What I wonder about is there some economic gain to be made here that we're not seeing? So, for instance,
individually or from the government?
Either or both.
Okay.
It's, you know, if you think about it, if you're a real estate developer, you love to have captured markets. And when you're in a train station or an airport or someplace like that,
they can charge $7 for a Diet Coke.
Right. And so
Burger King can.
I would be watching very carefully to see if the federal government takes over these train stations, who's going to be the leasing agent for those spaces? Which businesses are going to get those contracts, and who are the people behind those businesses?
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, that's usually the first motive of murder mysteries is like who stands to get benefit from the money.
Right.
What about the sort of the context of train stations in history? Like train stations have always had this larger than life, I don't know, status within, you know, when we talk about some of the significant leaders of the 20th century, for whatever reason, they all had a close nexus to trains. Trains have become highly politicized in the United States, usually with the left talking more about the expansion of train networks than the right.
And that's the principle, much of the left, myself included. I'd love to see more mass transit in the United States funded by the federal government or by state. I don't care. I'd just like to see more mass transit.
Why do trains seem to have this large significance in politics?
Well, I mean, I think for several reasons. Early on, let's go back to the Transcontinental Railroad, which is 107 years ago.
Golden Spike was in Utah in what, like the 1890s or something like that. Yeah.
So part of it was an economic development play. You know, when you're able to create connectivity between points that were previously disconnected, now you have the ability for population centers to shift, and you have the ability to build cities where you had towns before and so forth. And real estate has always been a big driver of particularly rail transportation. I think back to a development we helped with in Florida. The Brightline, private sector investment in Florida between Miami and Orlando. A real estate developer actually paid to put the train in place using some leverage from the federal government. But the reason why was because that developer had control of the adjacent property. So they could build housing units, they could build retail units, they could build commercial centers. And that value was greater than the cost of actually building the train. So I think a lot of times, the reason why it is such in the conversation in this country is because real estate developers, going from local government all the way to the federal government, always have a voice at the table because they are the ones contributing significantly to campaigns. But also, it is actually true that as our cities have been built out, real estate has played a huge role in sort of the proliferation of mass transit. New York City's subway system started with a real estate developer building that subway system initially. People thought it was crazy, but now you see in New York it works pretty well. So I think there's a relationship between economy and mobility that plays a role in it.
Do you think what's the partisan dimension of this? It is interesting. I mean, DC is a blue place. Boston, Massachusetts is a very blue place. Is it just that there's more transit hubs in cities that are blue, or is it that those transit hubs are underperforming in terms of safety and confidence and everything else? Would it be a good idea for the administration to go into some places where there are transit hubs in red places that may be underperforming?
I've always been a big proponent in building more transit in more diverse parts of the country. North of the Mason-Dixon line, you see a lot more fixed rail transit. You know, whether it's transit or whether it's FRA rail transit like Amtrak. If you go south of Washington D.C., the rail lines are not electrified, and therefore they run slower. So you're on diesel going into Virginia, down across the south. Going north of Washington D.C., you're on electricity. You can go at 120 miles, 130 miles an hour. That has a profound effect on the degree to which people use it, because if it's faster, it's generally better. And so I think we've made mistakes as a country in not putting more rail transit in the South and across the Southwest. As a result, you'll have people in Washington who'll say highways are for Republicans, transit and rail are for Democrats. And I think that is a view that is held by some, but obviously people of both parties use all these different types of modes.
Let's accept the premise of President Trump and of Secretary Duffy. Let's just say we've got major problems with crime. We've got major problems with cleanliness at South Station and at Union Station. If you were tasked with that, what would you have done when you were secretary?
Number one, I would have treated it as a safety issue, which is within the clear domain of the U.S. Department of Transportation. Secondly, I probably would have pulled in the local officials, the people who actually have primary responsibility for public safety within the city, within the train station. In the case of Union Station, again, which the federal government owns, and which has developed a relationship with a nonprofit to run the station, you can also change the appointments on the board from the federal government. And you can do things to sort of tighten up the oversight of
but it would mostly flow through the local government and local controls.
Because again, at least now maybe it's changed in the almost 10 years since I served, but we didn't have funding in the DOT for police officers. We did not have funding to hire leasing agents. We didn't have fund. You know, I don't know where these resources are coming from.
What would be how would you enforce that? Like, otherwise you lose some of your funding if you don't clean up your act?
You can certainly say, like, you can threaten to remove the intermediary, the nonprofit that's running the train station. You could threaten, and that sometimes can shake people into following in line. But I think the fundamental problem the federal government is going to have is this one. To fix Union Station up, and it's got some pretty, it's an aged train station. It's a beautiful one, but some estimates say $8 billion is going to be required to fix it. So it's also one of these things where if you break it, you bought it.
Wow.
Yes.
So flipping a little bit, I think you're kind of the perfect person for this discussion, because not only were you Secretary of Transportation, but you were also Mayor of Charlotte, major city in North Carolina, major transit hub, beautiful airport, been there many times myself. So when you were mayor, were there kinds of help that you would have appreciated from the Department of Transportation? Like, what would you have wanted them to do more of that they weren't doing to help you out as a local leader?
So interestingly, the help that I would have loved to have had would have been operational funding for our transit systems. You know, because of the fact that local governments are typically operating these systems by themselves, they have very little flexibility to do things like provide transit fee abatements for students or for elderly people or things like that. And there are many people who are transit dependent who need a break on the actual fees that are paid to use the transit systems. The federal government could provide more operating support. It hasn't really done it. They did it for a brief time during COVID. Before that, it had been, back in the 1970s, early 80s, before the government had provided that operating support. But that's a different type of support than what we're talking about here. That's support where the funding goes local, the locals use it in a way that makes sense for them. What's happening now is an operational sort of overlay being placed on these train stations, in theory, and run by the federal government with very little local input.
So I think a lot of people who watch this podcast, and maybe a lot of people in our social circles,
millions of people,
are instinctually reluctant are scared of anything that this administration does. Is that founded here? Is it misplaced? Should people be apprehensive that President Trump and this Department of Transportation want to get involved more in Union Station and maybe South Station, or is this not that big of a deal?
I think Union Station is different than Boston South Station. The federal government already owns Union Station. It's not exactly a takeover; it's just a reclaiming of it. I think the questions I have are really more budgetary concerns, like how is the federal government actually going to pay to do what it's claiming it wants to do, and secondly, is this a sort of an activity that this administration intends to do? Is it intended to carry forward beyond this administration? Have they thought about what happens if a president comes after this president and decides they don't want to be in the operational business? Without an act of Congress to do this, it's sort of an activity of this administration. It doesn't necessarily have staying power beyond that. And there's a lot of things that will be broken on the way to doing what the administration wants to do that may or may not continue in the future. Does that make sense?
It does. And looking forward, do you think that this talk about public infrastructure and trains will be limited just to these two cases, maybe of Union Station and South Station, or do you see more expansion of operational role happening?
I think politically, I think what the administration is doing is it's doing everything it can to position these blue cities as places that are not being run well. And the train stations are just another example of what I think they're trying to do. By the way, taking over the train stations at the same time they want to cancel high-speed rail funding in California, which is also very interesting.
So this is an entry point into blue cities through the station.
The management of blue cities, maybe. The management of blue cities,
all right,
perhaps.
Last question, scale of 1 to 10. How nervous does this make you? South Station, let's say.
4, because, some of my friends more on the left are associating with the National Guard issue and saying, well, all these protests, it's an opportunity to control protest if it comes. Look, people are going to drive if they want to express political dissent, and the train stations are shut down. So I'm much more concerned about some of these National Guard issues and some of those other issues. But it is significant. I mean, I think the federal-local relationship should be cooperative and mutually assistive, and this doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, I thought it felt pretty good, but it could have used a little shine when we were out there on Monday. So maybe the federal government could do that. But
every single person said it could be better. It could be better.
We're getting the wrap here, and we promise to never speak over 30 minutes. Thank you very much for being with us. We're going to be at it again next Tuesday at noon, as always. And then, as always, we are speaking as individuals, not on behalf of the Harvard Kennedy School or any entity at Harvard. We want to thank Secretary Foxx for making some time for us. Any other?
Terrific. Last point is, if the federal government does get into a greater operational role, we have a big, beautiful MPP program where we train lots of public managers who are eager to take a bigger operational role and run these leases and run the trains. So Secretary Duffy, if you're looking for people to work for you, Harvard Kennedy School is your place.
Great. Love it.
Thank you very much.